I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, continued violence on the streets of Israel as Palestinians continue to wreak havoc upon the Israeli people. For some real analysis and some perspective, I am so pleased to have on our phones right now from Washington, David Makovsky, director of the project of the Middle East Peace Process at the Washington Institute for Middle East Policy. David, thank you so much for joining us.
It's always a delight to be with you, Mark.
Thank you, David. David, we've heard various people try to explain why they believe this violence is going on. And of course, we saw the Secretary of State suggest it had something to do with massive settlement expansion by Israel, and that there's frustration over the failure of the peace process. We've heard other people say that this is the result of incitement by the Palestinian leadership and a fabricated issue of an assault on the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. As far as you can determine, what's really motivating young Palestinians to take knives and guns and drive cars into bus stops trying to injure or kill Israeli Jews? What's going on here, David?
Mark, it's hard to say that there's one thing, but certainly these are people that can't even agree on the facts of what's happening. As you say, Israel has denied that it is wants to make any changes to the Temple Mount. I'm not even talking about the fact that the Palestinians don't even agree that historically, that there was a Temple Mount. By the way, the Supreme Muslim Council in the 1920s said this is Solomon's temple, but everything has changed now, and everything is more poisonous now than it was close to 100 years ago.
Yes.
So the lack of factual understanding. Daniel Patrick Moynihan used to say, I have his sign in my office, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but not to their own set of facts.
Yes.
But that's what we've got, is that there are some people saying Israel wants to make the changes. Israel denies it. But, look, this has unfortunately happened since 1991, in 96 and 2000, and now there have been a little bit in November of last year, too, where, in the Middle Eastern context, people too often believe conspiracy theories, and when they see the Israeli members of Knesset going up, they reach the worst conclusions. So this is a very bad situation. Are there other exacerbating factors, like people don't see a political horizon? There's problems of the economics in East Jerusalem compared to West Jerusalem, a sense of neglect. Yes, that too, but it's not one versus the other. It's all of it together. And, it just, what amazes me is, on one hand, Israel, and you know this, covering the Gaza war, Israel, if it wants to reach people in Gaza on the third floor of an apartment building, could tell someone through a text message on that third floor, we think you should move because they're going to be bombing the building in an hour or something like that. If they could find the text messages of the people in Gaza, why can't they find the text messages of the people in East Jerusalem and convey in Arabic what's really happening? Unfortunately, for a startup nation, it just seems like there's a technological ability. Maybe people won't believe whatever Israel says, but at least there are enough neutral validators that should be able to relay factual information in a way that bypasses all the filters that are out there.
So, David, I want to make sure our audience understands what you are or are not saying. Are you saying at the moment that you do feel that Israel has in some way failed to stop this from happening, that it has not taken the actions that are necessary that could have prevented the escalation of violence? Are you blaming Israel a little bit here?
Look, clearly I think incitement is a problem. And, when Abbas said something about the filthy feet has to leave the Temple Mount or something, it's just inexcusable. Or to say that defend the mosque, as if someone is out to, that's almost like yelling, fire in a crowded theater. That is, and we've seen this time after time, Again, the incitement is a big piece of this, and I'm not excusing the Palestinian side of it. I want to be very crystal clear. But I'm saying on top of that, you have other issues. And, the lack of a peace process part of it, the economic disparity, is a real problem. Some of these places are like almost no man's zone. Israel doesn't want to invest in infrastructure in some of these places because they don't know if they're giving them up. So you have that. Then on the, quote, Hasbara informational side, Israel's not getting its story out. Would it have prevented it? Can I prove that? I can't prove it. But I'm just saying there's got to be a way in Arabic to reach a wide swath of Palestinians for Israel to get its story out that it has no intention of changing the Temple Mount. You cannot rely on Al Jazeera to get that message out for Israel.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and you do think that the Arab living and Palestinian living in East Jerusalem, if they got a text from the Israeli government,
like you said, I don't know if they're going to believe anything the Israeli government
that's the
says.
problem.
But imagine if they got a text that said Ban Ki-moon says, or they got a text that the European Union says.
But they won't say. Ban Ki-moon won't say.
Some of these leaders would. I think some of these leaders would do it. I think so. No one wants to see bloodshed.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe not Ban Ki-moon. I'm not a spokesman.
Right.
But I'm saying there's got to be enough neutral validators out there that could say, indeed, given the information we know, there's no such plan.
Okay.
Get that out in Arabic and get,
Were you personally disappointed in the way in which the State Department has reacted here? When you hear the Jewish criticism of Secretary of State Kerry talking about the violence as a reaction to massive settlement expansion, when you hear the State Department trying to in some way draw a moral equivalency, even though at one point they did condemn the violence, but for a long time it was all about.
The first sentence of the press release that I saw yesterday or 2 days ago, I wish it was done earlier.
Yep.
Said we condemn in the strongest terms, acts of terrorism against Israeli civilians. I mean, there didn't seem to be any caveats there. Were there other things in the statement that suggest a certain even-handedness? Maybe. But I think that opening statement, both at State and at the White House, was unambiguous that Israeli citizens are victims of terrorism, full stop, and that the U.S. condemns it in the fullest, strongest terms. I think you can't just say we regret the loss of life on all sides, kind of thing.
Right.
You had to say the Israeli citizens are getting stabbed, and you have to say it. And I think that they did yesterday. Did they do it early enough? I haven't been keeping up, I must admit, because of other factors. I haven't, been tracking it early on, but I will look into that. But I was glad that the opening statement was unambiguous. And of course, no one wants Palestinians to suffer either. I didn't see it as on the one hand, on the other hand kind of thing. But I know there's some people who did. But I felt that the opening sentence was unambiguous.
David, for a while, you were inside the administration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you decided, for some reason, you wanted to come back to the Washington Institute.
Yeah.
Was it because it was too frustrating for you inside?
Look, Mark, I came to do a job, which was there was going to be a peace process, led by the secretary, and someone said, "Can you help in the cause of peace?" Do you know anyone who would say no?
No, of course
I wanted to help my country. I wanted to help the cause of peace.
Good for you.
Okay, so I came to help out. And then as soon as that broke down, there was a war in Gaza. And I just think that's irresponsible. If there's a war, you do what you can do to deal with that. So I stayed. But once, you come for peace, you stay for war. Then I felt if there's something real in terms of negotiation, I said I'd return. But I didn't come to hang out, and I have a lot of respect for the men and women who were, for their service to our country. And if there's an active peace process and they want me back, I'm happy to come back. But, I came to do a job. If there was no active negotiation, though, I love the think tank world. It's very enjoyable. You can speak your mind. You're your own boss. It's a wonderful life.
We were all very happy when you were inside. because few people have as broad an understanding and bring as broad a perspective as you do. So there was something very comforting about the fact that David Makovsky was part of the process. And, I've heard all kinds of speculation, so I'm glad you clarified it.
No. I came to do a job, and look, some of my colleagues also immediately left.
That's right.
Martin Indyk went back to the Brookings Institute. Elon Goldenberg was our chief of staff, went over to head Middle East programs at CNAS, a security-minded think tank in town. Laura Blumenfeld, I believe, went to the Wilson Center or somewhere else. So, it's normal. We were very task-specific. We didn't come to, become, foreign service officers. We came for something very specific, and if called again to help the country and help the cause of peace,
good for
I'm
you.
willing to do that.
Good for you. Then I ask a different kind of question. You hear all the time, David, that there are people who question the perspective of the Obama administration. There are people in the Jewish world who feel that the Obama administration and that the president himself is leaning over backwards to establish a good relationship with the Muslim world, and therefore is very both empathetic and sympathetic to the Palestinian cause to a point that injures the relationship of the United States to the State of Israel. From your perspective, how real is that? Or is that a sort of a misperception within the American Jewish community?
It's complex. I think that this was, first of all, a lot of the Arab world is the most angry with the Obama administration because of the Iran deal that they see as favoring Persia at the expense of the Arabs. So, people could have these wide-ranging ideas, but talk to some of the Arab governments, and they have their own perspective, I would say. Look, I think the nature of any administration is there's a certain rhythm. In the first term, you had names like Dennis Ross, Hillary Clinton, Panetta. You had David Petraeus. You had Tom Donilon, the National Security Advisor. You had names that basically you could call them old school names, but names that are people whose, I think, modus operandi is quietly work things out with Israel. And like every administration, there's a certain balance, like two wings of an aircraft, I would say. There's always going to be the loyalists around the president, and there's going to be the kind of the old professional hands that have been at this, have experience, and that there's always a balance between those two, and that's kind of the two wings of the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it could be the nature of that there's a certain attrition rate in every administration, that a lot of these older hands left government in the first term, and so I think disproportionately you had that the second term wing of the aircraft of the loyalists is what has become more pronounced. So I don't know. I think my view is you need always a mixture. I think the country served well when there is that sense of balance between those two wings.
Okay. One last question for you. There is some real feeling that the bottom line problem that is preventing any kind of peaceful resolution of conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians has to do with a fundamental conviction inside the Palestinian leadership that there can be no legitimate Jewish entity, state, in the Middle East. And we recently had a conversation with Michael Oren, who said that from his perspective, the President of the United States is neither anti-Israel, nor is he anti-Semitic, but that there is a failure to understand the extent to which there is this irredentist philosophy that is gripping Palestinian leadership. And by the way, it's a difference between Palestinian leadership and the average Palestinian on the street. But that the Palestinian leadership is entrenched in a notion that there cannot be in the Middle East a legitimate Jewish state. And if that is true, although there are all of these other legitimate ancillary issues that would be worthy of discussion if it were in a context of a possible peace solution, there can be no peace solution if you're dealing with a people who a priori believe there can be no legitimate Jewish entity in the Middle East. I want to know your perspective on that question. Do you believe there is a...
He's touching on a real problem that I think in the Arab world, there are a lot of people that see Jews as a religion and not as a people. And a lot flows from that. At the same time, I don't think I haven't discussed this with him recently, but I think Michael would admit that Abbas is not Hamas. And that Abbas would think we got to get a deal with Israel because it's good for the Palestinians. Now, if they're not interchangeable, Abbas and Hamas, but there's differences in that Abbas truly believes that the fire rockets at Israel is fundamentally bad for the Palestinians, then, many Israelis would say, I don't care that he doesn't accept Israel as a Jewish state. I need to solve this problem to the extent possible. If he's against violence, that's my partner. The problem is, as we found out in our negotiations, is that each of these guys want a deal, but they want a deal on their own terms. And their view of the United States is their job is to arm wrestle the other side to get them the terms they want. So this is the problem, and Abbas could not do the deal. Now, Netanyahu couldn't do it either. But fundamentally, there's a view in Israel that says, look, I might not get 100% of what I want, but if I could get 98% of what I want, that someone thinks that violence is bad for them, and they need to come to a deal with the government of Israel, and that's good for the Palestinians, well, that's good enough for many Israelis. But other Israelis will say, unless they say that we're Jewish is legitimate, then it doesn't matter that they don't believe in violence. It doesn't matter that they want a deal. It doesn't matter all the rest. That's the debate. And, I think when you look at all the people out there in Hamas that don't accept Israel the size of a telephone booth on a Tel Aviv beach, people would say, you know what? So they don't give us everything. They don't sing Hatikva. But I'd rather get a deal with someone and empower someone who's fundamentally against violence. That's what's good for Israel. And, there's a debate there. But that was one of the three issues that was left open, that we tried front door, back door, side door, basement, window, chimney to solve. You know what I mean? So others would say, look, this is an issue. I'm telling you, this is a debate within Israel. Others would say, listen, you're wasting all the time because I don't care. I don't need them to recognize my existence. I exist anyway without them. So if you can solve the substantive issues, then this is like cherry on the
right.
topic.
I understand.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the debate.
Yes. But you weren't able to work it out, David.
Look, I can't get into details. My view is, I think you've heard me a few times say that when it came to the issue of territory and refugees, that each side was more flexible than you think they are. Israel when it came to territory, Palestinians when it came to refugees. But when it came to the issue of Jerusalem and security arrangements and this question of Jewish state, yes or no, we tried a lot of different things, and we were not close on that. So, if you say, look, at baseball, if you're batting 2 out of 5, you're batting 400. 300, you're usually leading the league.
Right.
So why do you always have to hit the home run ball? Why don't you hit singles, doubles, triples, and we're better off than we are today, But once you put the home run ball as the goal, I'm going to hit 5 for 5, not 2 for 5. Then if you didn't hit 5 for 5, you failed on everything. That's the argument. I mean, I just think that if we can't solve it all, in the Middle East, whenever it's all or nothing, it's nothing.
Yes.
That's my point.
Yes.
And we should be a little more humble going forward about what we can achieve and what we cannot achieve.
But are you saying
this is no knock on the past? I mean,
yes.
3 times we've tried to hit the home run ball. We tried to hit it with Clinton at Camp David, with Condoleezza Rice in 2007-8, and at Annapolis, and now here. And so, these were honest efforts by honest and good people to try to solve this conflict. I think it was clear this was the biggest investment this time the U.S. has ever made in final status. We know where those gaps are better than ever, and I think we should, my personal view, being out of government, I obviously don't represent the United States, in my own personal view, which is better to hit the singles and doubles and triples than to go for the fences, because when you try to go for the fences, the odds of striking out are much higher.
Yes. You would be willing to do it in an interim, step-by-step basis,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that's my point.
Okay. And was Israel prepared to go step-by-step?
It's a very good question. In theory, yes, but they didn't want to do anything that would, I think, touch the settlers without being able to say to them, we solved it all. It's the spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down kind of thing, We want to be able to say we solved the conflict.
I see. And
in a strange way, they wanted us to, to say, they wanted us to say we're trying to solve it all, and that would justify, the gain would justify the pain. And so even though in Israel, in theory, has always been supportive of incrementalism, there were some who said, but if you have to make certain concessions, only for a grand deal. So in a certain way, Israel, preferred the grand deal, but again, they wanted it on its terms, and that was part of the problem. Each one thought they made a fantastic concession. Israel on territory, Palestinians on refugees. But the point is that each one is going to have to do more, and if you can't, then don't try to end the conflict. And just try to be more incrementalist.
Were the Palestinians as equally willing to be to engage?
No. Their view was we've been sold incrementalism for too long. We want to end it once and for all, and that we don't want to be accused by our right wing among the Palestinians that we have deferred Jerusalem or other issues. So for them, they were into all or nothing. This is part of the problem. If you define everything as all or nothing, then it's often in the Middle East, it's nothing.
Mm-hmm. David Makovsky, it is always so good to talk to you, and I appreciate the time. And I chase you all the time, but you continue to do outstanding work, and your analysis is often the best we can find. I thank you very much, and I wish you a Shana Tova.
Anytime. I wish you guys a lot of success going forward. It's a wonderful idea that you've embarked upon, and I'm always willing to help.
Thank you, David. You be well. The thoughts of David Makovsky, Director of the Project on the Middle East Peace Process at the Washington Institute for Middle East Policy in Washington, D.C. Well, we also thought it's important for you to hear an Israeli speak for him or herself, in this case for herself. And so we're very pleased to have on our phones now from Jerusalem a journalist and one who has a newsletter entitled Shabbat Shalom, The View from My Veranda. It's a pleasure to welcome to JBS Sheila Raviv. Sheila, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Mark, and I'm happy to talk to you from the most beautiful city in the world.
Tell me, what is the view, Sheila, from your veranda?
Oh, gosh, I could go and stand there and tell you about it.
Tell me about it.
The view from my veranda takes in most of southern Jerusalem. I see Gilo, I see the shopping mall, I see the high-tech center, I see the industrial area. But at the moment it looks spectacular because at night you can't tell what's industrial and what's housing. So it's absolutely beautiful.
That's lovely.
And since it rained last week, everything's glistening white as well.
It sounds so delicious, Sheila.
It is. I'm very privileged.
Okay. By the way, do I understand you were born in Scotland?
No, I was actually born in Wales.
In Wales.
In a very, very Zionist community called Cardiff.
And what's the journey of your life that brings you to Israel and Jerusalem?
Oh, gosh. I had parents, incredible parents, that were great Zionists, and they taught me all about Israel. They were here in 1953. I came the first time in 1963, and I think I came virtually every year since. And although I grew my children in the UK, I came here 25 years ago, and I'm thrilled to say my daughter lives here as well with those grandchildren. And I don't regret for 1 second being here, not only because of my husband, but because life here is so worthwhile and very Jewish.
By the way, Sheila, that brings me to the very point of our conversation. You know, very often American Jewry only knows what's going on in Israel through the American media. And it's one thing for people to watch JBS and to be able to hear people like yourself and get a perspective that is very, very different than one gets from the general American media, whether it's the written word or the electronic word, whether it's, you know, the New York Times or the, MSNBC and Fox and the networks and CNN television. And what American Jewry often sees, what Americans often see, is an Israel that is always on the verge of some kind of disaster, that you're always living with the kind of cycle of violence, as it is called here in America, a violent stream that would make people say to themselves, why in the world would anyone want to live in that kind of situation, in that kind of stress? So I'm asking a question in general before I ask you about the specifics of the last few weeks. In general, Sheila, what would you say to Americans and American Jews? And we have many non-Jews who are watching you right now as well. What would you say to America about what it is like living in the state of Israel day to day to day?
It's wonderful. We have the best food in the world. We have the best entertainment. We have great theater. We enjoy life. We believe in going out at night and promenading, and it's a whole family event. Yes, we have it's not the best neighborhood in the world, but in fact, you know, people talk to me about violence. If I admit that there are certain kind of rushes of violence. There are moments like 2 days ago, the Day of Rage. But in general, something I can't imagine being able to do in any other capital city in the world. If I choose to, I could go out at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, go for a walk, and not be afraid, because personal violence is something that doesn't happen here. I can walk. Children can walk on their own without the fear of people kidnapping them. It's a strange dichotomy of a non-violent society in a rather violent neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And we live life to the full. I guess that's how we deal with it. We really, really enjoy every second of our lives.
Yes. And by the way, when I've been in Israel, what you describe is just, it encompasses anyone who comes to Israel and stays for any length of time. All right, so now talk to me about the last few weeks and whether, in essence, they have cast a different pall over the streets of Jerusalem in particular, and really it seems as if the violence now is all throughout the land, even sometimes on the West Bank. But to what extent, Sheila, are you and your friends, your husband, are you now fearful of walking outside and fearful of the kind of attacks which we read about now virtually every single day?
Excellent question. We are more alert. We're more aware. But I suppose you could describe it as if you go to a really rotten neighborhood in any American city, you're going to be aware, you're going to be looking around you. You know, we here, many Israelis think that if you live in America, everyone walks around like in the Wild West.
Yes.
And people are shooting at each other all the time.
Yes.
And it's the same principle. When you watch the news, you see the awful things. Obviously, the last few days have been particularly horrific because we're talking about children who've been incited into such awful hatred that a 13-year-old goes off and with the pure intention of stabbing someone. Now, I know that in the States you hear about it, and schools have these things, these metal detectors and so on. We're not used to that sort of thing. And by the way, Mahmoud Abbas made a huge announcement that Israel was shooting down innocent 13-year-olds. I don't know if the American television showed it, but we not only have the film of him from CCTV, of him actually with the knife, this 13-year-old kid, but he's now sitting up in a hospital in Jerusalem, enjoying his halal food and being fed, and he looks really happy. So he wasn't killed, not in cold blood or anything, and despite the fact that he attempted to kill other people, we look after him, and we're going to heal him because that's the society we have.
Mm-hmm. Are you telling me, by the way, you are not frightened to leave your home?
I'm not frightened to leave my home. I am more cautious. The shopping malls are a little less full, but they're still pretty busy. Restaurants are full. Jerusalem hotels have had no cancellations. We're at complete full capacity. I don't know about other cities because I don't live there. But life goes on. In a way, we're kind of, I don't know if it's medically sound, but we're kind of schizophrenic because we know about our neighborhood, but we just get on with life. We'll slow down for a couple of days. We'll think about what we're doing and how to deal with it, and then we'll just get on with it. By next week, everyone's going to be back in the markets and wandering around at night and throughout the center of town. It's going to be back to normal.
Mm-hmm. All right, what happens in Israel when you see or hear reports coming out of the United States that a Secretary of State, John Kerry, says that the violence is a result of massive settlement expansion and a frustration with the two-state, a failure to implement the two-state solution, and in some way does not speak about the incitement by a Mahmoud Abbas that you just referred to. How do Israelis feel about the way in which they see it being played out in the United States?
Well, apart from being really angry that he compared the killing of people to building houses, which incidentally are in Jerusalem.
Yes.
We're not talking about some crazy settlement in the middle of nowhere. We're talking about houses in Jerusalem. I said I could see Gilo. Gilo is a lower middle class, mostly, neighborhood of Jerusalem, which he believes is a settlement. But basically we feel that it's yet another example of the fact that Kerry, I don't want to say anything bad because America is still our greatest friend and undoubtedly ally, but we feel that it's been so ineffectual, the manner in which this area has been handled. You know, David Cameron of the UK comes out and says how terrible the terror is. Stephen Harper of Canada, and even Putin came out and said that that we suffer terribly from terrorism and it can't be. And yet we don't hear anything from our greatest ally, and it makes us disappointed. Mm-hmm. It makes us look in other directions to see who our real allies are.
Mm-hmm. You do know, Sheila, that the American people, especially the American Jews, but it's not just American Jews, it's Americans in general, are 100% with the Israeli people. And I talk about this all the time. Israel is not simply an idea. Of course, the idea of Israel was a galvanizing presence at the beginning of the 20th century. But Israel is more than an idea. It is human beings. It is people. It is you and your husband, Zvi, and it's your children and your grandchildren. And for many American Jews, it is relatives and friends. And even if they have no relatives and friends, it is family. And what we care about is your well-being as people, not simply the idea that there should be a state of Israel, and I hope there always is a state of Israel. But it's not simply an idea. It is human beings. It is flesh and blood, and we have enormous concern and caring and affection and love for you. And while I understand how frustrating it must be when you don't see the kind of statements which we here as American Jews wish came out of the American administration, I hope you do know how the American people and how American Jewry is 100% with you. I hope you know that, Sheila.
Oh, we know it. We really know it. I think in the States you say we feel the love. We really, really do.
Well, good.
Which makes it slightly, I don't know if it makes it more frustrating or less to hear the administration speaking in a different tone.
Yes, absolutely.
No, we know. In fact, here there's a rather annoying expression. If something is really, really good, we say, "Hey, it's like America." so we really do feel that the American people really do love us. That's never been in question, ever.
Good. At the same time, I want you to understand, many American Jews, and I include myself in it, I am very disappointed in the American administration. I was disappointed during the Gaza war. I'm disappointed now. And one of the things we're trying to do here on JBS is give people like you an opportunity to speak we want Israelis to speak in their own voice, and we want to make sure we put the issue into a much more honest and complete perspective. And that brings me to my next question for you.
Yes.
When you look at the way in which there has been real incitement by Palestinian leadership, including Mahmoud Abbas, it's not simply Hamas. There are people here who want to make a sharp distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas. I have a harder time seeing it as a sharp distinction. But I'm wondering now the extent to which you and your friends believe there is a Palestinian leadership today. I'm not talking about the Palestinian people. I'm not talking about rank and file. I'm not talking about Palestinians on the street. I'm talking about Palestinian leadership typified by a Mahmoud Abbas. Do you and your friends see a Palestinian leadership which you believe honestly is willing to make some kind of compromise with the state of Israel that will allow a peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians? And permit me one question before that, and I should have asked this before, Sheila. How do you define yourself? Our viewers should understand who you are. Do you consider yourself to be on the left? Do you see yourself center left? Do you see yourself center right? Do you see yourself on the right? Where do you position yourself, Sheila?
That's an interesting question because I truthfully don't know. It depends on the day. It depends on what's going on. I would say that I've moved from Meretz on the far left, and sometimes my anger can take me further. But I would say center. I'm always in the center, as my son once said. Mum, you're always a pinkowette, which was one of Margaret Thatcher's favorite expressions. I'm center, but I waver to the left and right depending on the situation.
Okay, but at one time, Sheila, you were squarely with Meretz on the left.
That was before I lived. Oh, when I first came to live here, that was before the Second Intifada.
Before the Second Intifada, okay. So now you consider yourself, which, by the way, Sheila, the more I speak with Israelis, the more they echo what you just said, that they are basically somewhere in the center, and it wavers left or right depending on what the issue is, but the center is much broader than it used to be in the State of Israel, and the fringes, far left and far right, are in fact much more fringe. Having said that,
without question, and every song in Israel, every prayer in Israel is for peace. We want peace. We want someone to talk to, and I suppose that typifies the whole of this center, be it left or right.
Yes. All right, now answer my prior question. To what extent do you and your friends believe there is an honest faction within the Palestinian leadership today that could live in peace with the State of Israel?
If he wanted to, he could do it now. Mahmoud Abbas was given an option. When Ehud Olmert was Prime Minister, he gave him 97% of what he wanted. And Abbas came to Jerusalem. He sat in the Prime Minister's home. And they discussed everything. And the Prime Minister was told he has an appointment. He will be back in the morning. And the next thing they knew, he had gone. He didn't come back. He refused to sign. His life would not be worth living. And at the moment, the reason that the incitement has increased from him is because he's in a very precarious situation, and the far more extreme people want to come in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I had a recent conversation.
And by the way, the incitement doesn't only come. The person who is probably the worst and has probably created the situation you see with the young children now coming in to stab and to kill is, I believe, someone called Sheikh Raid Salah. Raid Salah was the one who took out the 400 truckloads of earth from underneath Al-Aqsa, and he's Israeli. He lives in northern Israel, but he is hateful. His level of hatred is so great that he was banned from the United Kingdom when he tried to come in. He goes into mosques and he incites the children. A very frightening man, but he's free because he's Israeli and we don't put people into prison. He's been tried and he may go to prison, but from prison he will have far more power. It's a bit of a catch-22 with people such as him.
Yes. Sheila, you're a mother and a grandmother, correct?
I am indeed.
Okay, so I asked you if you're afraid to go out. You said no. Are you afraid that your children are in danger?
Wow, that's a very big question. I worry because I worry. I've always worried. I'm a mum that always encouraged my children to go out as long as they let me know where they were. And I think that's true now. Do I want them to go on buses is a very different question. But they go, and they're going to their clubs, and they're going to everything. Their lives are continuing as usual, but rather than going on public transport, their parents are taking them places. Mm-hmm. My children and my husband's children are all too old. I have one American son, by the way, and one British son, and one Israeli daughter. Mm-hmm. So I'm well-rounded. But my husband, Tzvi, has 2 boys living here as well. So basically we have 3 children here, and 8 out of our 13 grandchildren are here.
Amazing. Mazal tov to you, Sheila. That is really wonderful.
And by the way, if I may just say one thing, my incredible husband was not only born here, but because he was born before the mandate, he's a Jewish Palestinian. Because during the mandate period, this whole area was called Palestine.
Of course.
From the word, and he was born here, so I'm married to a Palestinian. But in terms of danger, he has an expression born of experience. He says he's served in 5 wars, and he's just fine. And he had a little brother who crossed the road and was killed in an accident. So, you can't tell. You don't know what your goral, what your kismet, what your fate is. And that's sort of the way that we live here. We know that most people come back from everything.
Mm-hmm. So I asked you a moment ago about whether you thought there was a Palestinian leadership that was willing to make peace. What you said was Abbas could do it if he wanted to, although then you said he would be risking his life. Then you tell us about another Palestinian who lives in northern Israel, who you believe is really inciting terrible violence against the state of Israel. And so, forgive me, I want to push you one more time. It doesn't sound to me as if you believe there is today, in power in the Palestinian world, a leadership ready to live in peace with the state of Israel. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. They cannot. They cannot. This land, this tiny, weeny strip of land is considered waqf. It's considered land that was once Islamic land during the Ottoman period, therefore must always be Islamic land. And as you know, that reached into Europe as well, into Spain and parts of Italy and so on. Once land has been Islamic land, it must always be. Therefore, we're a blot on the landscape. We came back and we weren't meant to, but we're here to stay. We're tiny, but we're strong, and we worship life, not death and not killing. We worship life, so we're pretty good at surviving.
It has been wonderful meeting you on the phone. I can't wait to meet you in person. I really hope that I get to Israel soon and to Jerusalem, and that I get to visit you and take a look from your veranda. But I hope you will let me come see you when I come to Israel, and I also hope you'll let me continue to call you from time to time and let you share perspective with the American audience that watches you on JBS.
With pleasure, and you're invited to dinner as well.
Thank you, my darling. I appreciate it very, very much. My best to you, to Tzvi, to your children, 13 grandchildren. You stay well, and we'll see each other soon.
Okay, take care. And we really do love America.
Thank you, my darling. Be well. Sheila Raviv, an Israeli journalist. She has her own newsletter, Shabbat Shalom, The View from My Veranda, an extraordinary example of who Israel is. Again, Israel is not an idea. Israel is Sheila Raviv and the countless Israelis who have extraordinary hearts and souls. And it's very important that, for all we see on American television, for all the Morning Joe, and for all the, for all of the MSNBC and all of the CNN and all of the NBC, ABC, CBS, and all of the BBC and all the Al Jazeera and all the Fox. These are people. These are lovely people. And it should never be forgotten. And Americans, Jew and non-Jew alike, should really have an appreciation, not for the startup nation in terms of technology, but for the nation of human beings who are extraordinary souls and who, despite horrific circumstances, continue to never be angry and never be rude, and to find a way to be as constantly giving and open and hopeful and committed to peace as you heard Sheila was. An extraordinary human being, and I'm so glad we had the chance to talk to her and to share her with you here on JBS. As always, my thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, who does a magnificent job in all the facets here at JBS, and so much of what you see is a result of Sloan's work. And to Serge Goldberg, who is our production coordinator and who does 1,000,000+ things to make JBS what it is, and the two of them are extraordinary. Together with Dara Golub, our JBS Associate Director, three people who try to coordinate our staff and make sure that everything you see on JBS is as wonderful as we can possibly make it for you. As well as our producers, Carol Lilienthal and Jan Weiss, who do a magnificent job, and all the people behind the scenes whose name every now and then I get to share with you, but I am surrounded by extraordinary people who are devoted to making JBS what it is every single day. And of course, always my thanks to you, our viewers, and all of you who are constantly in touch with me with such lovely emails and letters and encouragement, and also with your financial support. And look, we're just like PBS television. We rely on you. There will never be a JBS unless there are people out there who really want to support what we do and who understand how important it is for there to be this kind of American television channel on American television. So I always hope all of you who watch and enjoy JBS will make sure you, at one point or another, always give us your financial support to make this experiment in Jewish education and Jewish information possible. But my greatest thanks always go to you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.